All right, so on to the black cards. Thanks for the reminder. All right, so our first black card is Blood on the Snow. Blood on the Snow is a 6-mana snow sorcery. It has choose one, destroy either all creatures or destroy all planeswalkers. Then return a creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow spent to cast the spell. So, in limited, this card is fine but expensive. I would always play this in my sealed pool. A 6-mana Wrath is still a 6-mana Wrath. In limited, the Destroy All Planeswalkers clause is unlikely to be relevant. But it's not bad. In draft, I'm pretty skeptical of ever playing a 6-mana Wrath. But again, in sealed, the games go longer, the games are grindier, people are going to play their big fat 7/7s for 7. And this is just a good way to kind of just not die to those in the late game. In EDH, I think this card has a lot of potential. Obviously, you probably want to be in a snow deck. It's not really going to do a ton. Because the ability to pay, again, up to 6 snow mana, especially in EDH, where you can just very much make that a thing guaranteed, is really good, I think. It's not going to be like, you're like, again, this isn't a format warping card for EDH, but it is a solid pickup for the snow deck that I think is now actually, as of this set, a real deck. Between the stuff from Cold Snap, the stuff from Modern Horizons, the stuff here, I think the snow deck is actually real now, and this is a card you would play in that deck. Next card is Bloodsky Berserker, a 2-mana 1/1. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Bloodsky Berserker, and it gains menace until end of turn. So, again, this is another sort of enabler card, sort of like semi-payoff card. Actually, not an enabler card, rather a payoff card. For the play 2 cards archetype that exists in black and white. So the first trigger already turns this into a 3/3 menace. The second trigger turns this into a 5/5 menace. So you can see it doesn't take very long for this card to snowball out of control pretty aggressively. If this stays on the board for too long, you are going to die to it. This, for me, reminds me a lot of Fearless Fledgling from Zendikar Rising, where it started off very innocuous, but it just kind of grows and grows and grows until it's just like very difficult to block in any way efficiently threat. I think it's solid. I think it's a very good payoff for being in the white-black play 2 spells deck, assuming that deck is real. Again, a lot of this is making a lot of assumptions on what archetypes are valid, what aren't. I have no idea yet. But if that deck is good, this card will be one of the reasons why. Alright, we already hit a mythic for our black spells. We've got Burning Rune Demon. So Burning Rune Demon is a 6-mana 6/6 flyer. Already, I'm picking this every game, every time. Even in draft, unless the format is unbelievably aggressive, and I'm not really inclined to think it will be, this is just an obscene bomb. A 6-mana 6/6 flyer is just huge. It's going to win the game very freaking fast. Oh yeah, the art is great. For sure. So again, you already had me at 6-mana 6/6 flyer. Like, that's just a solid card. That by itself wouldn't be like a windmill slam or anything, but it would just be good. Let's see what it does though. So when it ETBs, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon that have different names. So this is mostly meant so that it can't just like keep finding copies of itself and kind of go off and chain off. It's just a safety valve, I think. If you do reveal those cards, an opponent chooses one of them. Put the chosen card in your hand and the other in your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So you basically go get 2 cards that are different cards, and then your opponent gets the choice of which one they would like you to draw. So it's like, it's a little weird, right? Because the idea is you're presumably just going to go get the 2 best cards left in your deck. But the problem is if one of those cards is notably better than the other card, they're just going to give you the worst of the 2. So it depends on how much worse than the best card your second best card is. There's obviously ways that you can kind of juke this a little bit too, right? If you've got a reanimation effect, you can, your opponent will give you the second worst card, but then you can just get the best card back out of your graveyard because it doesn't go back into your library. It goes into your yard. Overall, I think this is a fine card. Like it's basically a 6 mana 6/6 flyer that draws you the second best card in your deck. That's what this card does. Which I think is pretty good. Um, in EDH, I generally think this card isn't going to make it unless you're like just very committed to your demon tribal theme, because ultimately the card Runescarred Demon exists, which for 1 extra mana lets you just find literally any card you want, keep that information secret, and just put it into your hand. So you still get the card, but it's the actual card you wanted, not the second best card you wanted. And I think that's worth the extra mana in a format like EDH. So, and again, not to say this card won't see EDH play, but it is very much, to me, worse than Runescarred Demon for very, very similar cost. Our next card is another rare, Crippling Fear. So this is a 4 mana sorcery. Choose a creature type, and then creature types that aren't the chosen type get -3/-3. Hold the... Alright, sorry about that. So Crippling Fear, pretty cool card. I mean, it's essentially a mostly unconditional -3/-3 Wrath. It's actually funny. It's like the opposite of like Witch's Covenant or whatever from Eldraine, where that one was all the creatures of the chosen type get -3/-3. This is everything except the chosen type gets -3/-3. So the idea is your deck presumably has a bunch of elves or berserkers or something, and then you basically make all of those cards safe from this, and then kill all your opponent's cards that are of, again, presumably a different type. Notably, if you're playing a mirror match, this card is not going to do a lot because your opponent's probably playing the same creature type as you. Solid card, but not like busted or anything. Most of the time, it's going to be like a decent little pseudo wrath. It's not going to clean the whole board up necessarily, but it will do a good job of getting a decent number of things off the board. I would probably err on the side of putting this in the sideboard in a draft deck, unless I was drafting a very specifically aggressive tribal deck. If you're playing if you're actually drafting like just tribal elves, then it's probably worth main decking because you can just always name anything that's not elves and probably get a decent return on that. In sealed, again, a little harder because there's gonna be your strategy is gonna be more on focus. You're not gonna be able to guarantee that it's gonna be like a one-sided effect. It's fine. I guess you probably do main deck this in sealed still. We'll have to see. Alright, Death Knell Berserker. 2-mana 2/2. Already a fine, just limited, bread and butter card. When it dies, if its power is 3 or greater, make a 2/2 black zombie berserker creature token. But notably, it doesn't do that by itself. So basically, you need to have had no new Ruinecraft cards as far as I can tell. No. Sorry. So it doesn't make a 2/2 by itself. You do need to somehow have grown this thing's power before it died. For example, using perhaps demonic gifts. This is a cute little combo right here. Oh, yeah, that's the one I was talking about, Witch's Vengeance, right? This is the opposite of Witch's Vengeance, the flip side of that. So, yeah, so let's skip right to demonic gifts, actually, take a look at this. So this is 2 mana, instant, until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+7, gains whenever this creature dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So you're attacking your opponent. They have, let's say they have a 3/4, and you attack your 2/2 into them, and for some reason they decide to block. They're like, oh, well, they're not even going to cut their zombie token, it's just a 2/2, block. You cast demonic gifts, and now, not only do you have a 4/2, that is now going to trade with their 3/4, but you've now grown this thing's power, which means when it dies, it's going to give you a zombie, and then it'll come back to the battlefield. So basically, for 2 mana, you've created 2 2/2s and killed their 3/4. Now that's a very yeah, and this is what I'm saying, right? This is a very cute, but this is it's not exactly the most amazing thing or anything like that, but they're both in common and they're both in black. So this is an interaction to watch out for. If your opponent ever attacks you with a Death Knell Berserker and the attack looks suspicious, if they make a weird attack with Death Knell Berserker, they're almost always going to have a combat trick, unless they're just running a really aggressive bluff. But this in particular might be the combat trick to look out for. Now, the thing is, I don't think this card is particularly great unto itself. but in combination with a Death Knell Berserker, it is much better. All right. Next, we have Dogged Pursuit. So this is a 4-mana enchantment. This is the beginning of your end step. Each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. This card is bad. I'm quite convinced that this card is bad. A lot of people are trying to draw comparisons between this card and Ill-Gotten Inheritance, which does the same thing but on the upkeep, and then has the ability to sack itself for like I think it was 6 mana to deal 4, gain 4. This just sits there and like plinks away at your opponent. It's not. I'm not going to say it's actually unplayable, but it's pretty freaking bad, and I would very much strongly caution against playing this card. The only scenario where I like this card is potentially in a sealed deck, where your opponent is playing a very grindy game, but isn't particularly proactive, and so you can just play this and basically like try to out long game them, basically. But like that's such a fringe set of scenarios that I'm just really not a fan of this card. Don't play this card. It looks cool because it does a free thing and you gain life and they lose life. This card is a trap. Don't play this card. Next card is Draugr Necromancer. Shout out to any Skyrim fans out there. I don't know. I don't even like it in Ayara, to be perfectly frank. It's super slow. It's just really slow and expensive. Like, is that really what you want to spend your entire turn 4 doing? Is just playing a spell that's gonna like gain you a bit of life and drain your opponent for a little bit. I know that Ayara does a lot of gain and drain, but I just feel like you want Ayara, you want creatures in your Ayara deck. You don't want a random enchantment that like does what Ayara does, but like worse. That's my gut anyway. Obviously, you know, everybody's free to play their cards, but my read is that this card is just actively not good. So Draugr Necromancer, it's a 4-mana 4/4. I'm already pretty into it. Like that's just a good stat line. It's a snow creature, notably, if that matters. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, so non-token and opponent, so there's a little bit of clause there, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. So basically, this is a replacement ability, notably. So this already counters any abilities of your opponent's cards that say when this creature dies, because it's actually being exiled instead of dying, and therefore not actually dying. You may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent's own with ice counters on them, and you may spend mana from any snow sources as or mana of any color to cast those spells. So this card I think is actually really cool and really good. In limited, this card is just really solid because it's a 4-mana 4/4 that's basically turning your opponent's resources into your resources at no additional investment. Like it just does all these things for free, which is ridiculous. Again, it's like weird graveyard hate because it exiles the creatures of theirs that die instead of killing them, which means that they can't reanimate them or anything like that. And as long as you have some amount of snow sources, even if they're playing a different color than you, like let's say you're playing a blue-black deck and they're playing a red-green deck, as long as you have snow lands, you can tap your blue snow land to make red mana for the purposes of casting your opponent's exiled red card because of the way that this works, which is really strong. I think this card is super cool. I think it's going to be really fun in Brawl and everything, and I honestly think this card actually is good enough to play in EDH as well. Again, you're going to want a pretty aggressive Snow Shell for it, but the ability to just hate on your opponent's graveyard incidentally while also taking their creatures from them and using them to your own advantage is a lot of things kind of lining up in a really nice package at a relatively reasonable rate too. Like for a 4-mana 4/4, this card does a lot. I like this card a lot. It might be a little clunky in draft, but again, a 4-mana 4/4 is not embarrassing. And if you even get to cast one spell off of this that you got from your opponent, that's really good. Like that's just super strong. All right, our next card is another 4-mana zombie cleric, but this one has Boast 4, returning your target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And it's a 4-mana 3/3. I don't think this card is particularly good. Like Boast 4 is actually like a ridiculously large amount of mana. Like you're basically paying 4 mana for an effect that typically costs 1 mana on a card called Raise Dead. It's fine. you may need like it fills a curve decently. Like it's a 4 mana 3/3, which is like not that bad, but like if you're ever activating the bows, you're probably already winning because it means that your opponent is putting you under so little pressure that you can afford to pay 4 mana into a niche ability, and you're not trying to like play more things onto the board or whatever. Because notably, again, this is to hand, not to graveyard or to battlefield. If this ability was to the battlefield, it would be much better. But of course, it would probably not be a common if that was the case. The bottom line is, you'll probably play this some amount of the time, but it's not the thing to get excited about. All right, here is our black tribal equipment for the set. So this one is a 2 mana equipment that gives the equipped creature +2/+2 and menace, but it equips for 4. Equip for 4 is actually infinite. Like, if you're ever equipping this, again, you're either very badly losing or very easily winning, because again, 4 mana is just so much to spend on a marginal effect like this. Now, it does again come with the upside, the small upside, of you do have the ability to pay 3 mana, and if you do, then it basically comes into play as a creature. It's sort of like a living weapon, if anyone's familiar with that mechanic from New Phyrexia. The idea is basically, so if you pay 5 mana, this is essentially a 4/4 menace. So it's a 5 mana 4/4 menace, where when the 2/2 that it really is dies, you do get the equipment like lying around, and it might do some stuff, but it's very well. The thing is, it's not a zombie generator, right? Because it only happens when you cast it. This isn't like every turn pay 3. So it only happens the one time. You get 1 token, it's already wearing the hat, and then if the token dies, the hat sticks around, you get to put the hat on something else. But the hat costs 1,000, and that's not great. It's okay. Again, they're all in common, which leads me to believe that they must be better than I think they are, but I don't think they're much better than I think they are. Like, I'm not particularly excited about this. Alright. Well, no, because notably Conjurer's Closet, I could be wrong about this, but Conjurer's Closet, correct me if I'm wrong, only blinks creatures. Which means that would actually not do at all what you want it to do, because it would blink the 2/2, and then the 2/2 would just die, and now you would just have a shitty hat. And again, the thing is, if you're playing a deck with Conjurer's Closet, like, we can do better than that. We can do better than blinking this to make a 2/2. That's just my 2 cents on it anyway. Okay, Dread Rider, 6 mana for a 3/7. Okay. 2 mana and tap. Exile a creature card from your graveyard. Target opponent loses 3 life. Weirdly enough, I actually think this card is decent. I don't think you're ever really playing this in a draft, but I actually like having one of this card in my sealed deck, I think. It's a gigantic butt. Like, a 3/7 is very difficult for your opponent to attack into profitably, because the 3 power means it's actually going to threaten to trade with a number of things that they're attacking you with, and 7 just means that they need to have some stupid bomb in play to ever bust through this thing. Like, 7 is a lot of toughness. Oh no, don't worry about it, Redact. People like, card evaluation is difficult. I consider myself decent at it just because I've been playing this game forever, and I've seen enough cards come and go that I've like sort of get a sense of like, this effect reminds me of this effect, and that time it wasn't that good, so this time it's probably not going to be that good. Or maybe, this time it's going to be better than it was last time because it combos well with this thing that it didn't have access to last time, things like that. It's tough. It's really tough. You don't have to apologize. It's, it's all part of the learning process. But what I like about this card may as well have Defender, as far as I care. If it had Vigilance, this card would be sick, but Vigilance is definitively not a black ability. But the idea is you basically just block, you sit, like, it can attack if you need to, but otherwise you just sit here, block your opponent's stuff, and then at the end of their turn, every turn, you just pay 2, tap it, and chunk them for 3. So it's like an attack, but you also have to block with it. So it sort of has like this weird, like, 2 mana pseudo-vigilance ability of like having gotten an attack in functionally, right? 3 life, 3 damage, etc., while still getting to just be a pretty freaking hard thing to get through. Like, I think that if I'm playing a sealed pool and I'm playing black, I really wouldn't hate having it. I don't want multiples, but a single Dread Rider near the top of my curve sounds pretty okay to me. Alright, this card is spicy. This card is really spicy. So, Dream Devourer. It's a 2 mana 0/3. What? Okay, go on. Each non-land card in your hand without Foretell has Foretell. Its Foretell cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 2. So basically, I can pay 2 generic and exile, like, and for each 2 generic I pay, I can just exile my whole hand. I can exile my whole hand if I felt like it. And then the cost of casting it off of Foretell then becomes 2 less than whatever their converted mana cost is. So again, all it's doing is it's basically breaking up the cost of the card. Like, let's say I've got this card, Dread Rider, right? So I've got a 6 mana card in my hand. But what I can do is I can go, like, if I've got, like, turn 2 Dream Devourer, or let's say I've, like, on turn 4, I have Dream Devourer and I'm holding this Dread Rider in my hand. I can foretell the Dread Rider now for 2 mana, and then on the following turn, for 4 mana, I get to cast my 6 mana card on the following turn, which is really cool. And also, again, this thing gets an ability, so whenever I foretell a card, it gets +2/+7 until end of turn. So it's an 0/3, but every time I foretell something from my deck, which is the act of actually suspending it, not casting it, which is kind of like confusing. Foretelling the card is paying the 2 generic to exile it, but its foretell cost is the cost of actually casting it from exile. It's not exactly the most intuitive thing in the world, but, and I'm expecting to see people confuse that. But so this thing can get it pretty aggressive, right? This thing is a 2/3, maybe a 4/3, and you get to do all this kind of cool stuff. So this card doesn't do anything by itself, but it's a really cool enabler. I think the coolest thing I heard of in terms of how to use this was in a Chainer Dementia Master deck. I should pull up Scryfall just so I can, like, allude to other things. Oh, sorry, no, Chain of Nightmare deck, not Dementia Master. So in this deck, basically, if you foretelling in this deck is really cool because it basically says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you didn't cast it from your hand, it gains haste. So the idea is you can basically wait, what? Oh, there we go. If you foretell a creature off of Dream Devour and then cast it for its foretell cost, it didn't enter out of your hand, and so it gains haste off of the foretell. So it's kind of a cool combo in that. That seems really cool to me. All right. Dusk Wielder. So this is one of our elves. So the sub theme for black green is elves, elf tribal basically. So you're gonna see a lot of elves in black, even though they're normally green, because in this format they're black and green. So it's a 1 mana 1/2 elf, and it has boast, pay 1. Target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So functionally speaking, if you have 1 mana to spare, every time this attacks, it's already, like, getting in for 1, and you're gaining 1, and then it might also get in for the 1 that it's representing from its power. So this essentially attacks with, like, for 2 damage. Mind you, if they block with a 2/2, that's not going to work the way you want it to, unfortunately. Decent little card. It's cheap. It's a good little enabler for the elf deck, I think, like in terms of just having bodies in the battlefield. It's also a Berserker, and there's a Berserker sub-theme as well in black. I think that's cool because it's an elf Berserker, so I think basically it works well in black. I actually think this card is pretty good the more I think about it, because it's a 1-drop for the black-white play 2 creatures deck, or play 2 spells deck, because you can easily have this be your first spell and then play another spell on top of that in a turn, right? So it's a 1-drop for that deck. It's an elf for the elf tribal deck. And then it's a Berserker for the Berserker tribal deck, which is, I believe, what the red-black color pair is doing. So this actually fits really nicely into, like, a lot of the archetypes that black is in, and it's a very cheap card. I don't think you want a lot of them, but if it works with any of those synergies, this is probably worth some consideration. I think it's cool. I think it's pretty unimportant. Like, I'm only talking about limited here. Of course, I don't think this is worth mentioning for constructed formats, EDH, whatever. Like, this card just doesn't matter. But cool for limited for those archetypes. Overfang Disciple. So this is literally just Ravenous Rats, but it's an elf cleric. So again, the card technically already exists, but if the creature types are more relevant to you than rat, then that's a bonus for you. ETBs. Somebody discards a card. You have 2 mana 1/1. I don't think this card is that good without the tribal types mattering. I think this card is pretty bad in limited, generally speaking. It's better in sealed because, again, in sealed card advantage, or like raw card advantage, is a little bit more relevant, but it's still not particularly exciting. I don't think this is worth it in draft, but if you are, again, playing a deck where the creature types matter, if you just need a sort of a critical mass of elves, then this is a totally fine card if the type matters. But if you're just playing it as a 2-mana 1/1, your opponent discards a card, you can probably do better. All right. Our next black mythic, Eradicator Valkyrie. So this is a 4-mana 4/3 flying lifelink hexproof from Planeswalkers. Once again, hexproof from Planeswalkers, basically flavor text as far as limited is concerned. This is not likely to ever come up. It would require you to have a mythic and them to have another mythic. It could happen. It will happen over the course of this format. It's not what I would plan around. So pretend this doesn't exist. This is flavor text. It's a 4-mana 4/3 flying lifelink. That's absurd. You're going to first pick this card almost every time. Unless something even more absurd is in the pack somehow. Like a 4-mana 4/3 flying lifelink is just a ridiculously good body. It's very hard to block. It's even harder to block profitably. And this thing is also just going to gain you 4 life a turn, which means you're basically creating an 8-point life swing every time this thing connects, which is absurd. This will kill your opponent very fast if they don't answer it. Notably, it also has a boast ability. So on top of all these other things, you can boast, sacrifice a creature, each opponent also sacks a creature or planeswalker. So you do have to sack one of your own creatures to do this. I don't recommend sacking herself. But basically, if you have random cannon fodder lying around, you can use it to whittle your opponent's board down too. Now again, they get to choose what they sacrifice, so they might also just get rid of their crappy 1/1. You're not going to get rid of their great card or anything like that necessarily. But if they have like one good creature or a planeswalker, and they don't have anything like defending it, I mean, they're probably already in trouble if you have this card and they have a planeswalker and they have no blockers. But the idea is that this allows you to turn random bad cards, like a Dusk Wielder, like that's on turn 7, not really doing anything real anymore. It allows you to like cash that in to get rid of one of their blockers, or a planeswalker if you're really lucky, or unlucky technically, which I think is super, super good. I think this card is excellent. I mean, it's a mythic, it should be, but yeah, first pick this card, you'll be pretty happy every time, I imagine. Feed the Serpent. Okay, I raised my eyebrows at this card. This card is really, really good. This is unconditional instant speed removal that exiles, not even destroys, exiles target creature or planeswalker. Again, the planeswalker part, largely flavor text with regards to limited, but the sheer flexibility of this card at common is absurd, and the rate is really good. Like, for a moment, let's consider that this card exists. Vraska's Contempt from Ixalan, so this is about 3 years ago. So again, 2 black, instant, exile target creature, planeswalker, gain 2 life. Rare. So basically, all it took to downgrade this card from rare to common was eliminating the gain 2 life clause, which is ridiculous. Like, this card is probably the best black common. It might even just be the best common in the set. I'm putting that out there. Oh yeah, I mean, get it, like, again, exile is just a beautiful word when you're playing Commander. Like, we all know that the graveyard is just your second hand when you're playing Commander. So if you have the ability to just get that out of there for good, now we're talking. No, I think this card is absurd. This is a card that I would first pick over a lot of rares. Like, I'm not first picking it over, like, Eradicator Valkyrie, but, like, I'll probably pick it over Dream Devourer, honestly. Draugr Necromancer, maybe not. I'd probably pick it over Crippling Fear. Like, legitimately, I think I would rather play Feed the Serpent in my deck than Crippling Fear. I just honestly think it's better. The combination of exile, instant, 4 mana, there's nothing not to like. And again, if your opponent is lucky enough to have a planeswalker and you're unlucky enough to play against that opponent, you now actually aren't just dead to it. Because you have a common way of dealing with their mythic card, which is absurd. So yeah, this card is nuts. I think, not nuts, but really wild. This card is really, really, really good. Play it in every black deck, play as many as you can. Draft sealed, doesn't matter. For EDH, we're not talking about this, obviously. We can do better in EDH, of course. In Brawl, I wouldn't even be surprised to see this make the cut in Brawl. I think this card is actually good enough to see play in Brawl, just because of, again, how versatile it is. At least for budget Brawl. Like, Murderous Rider and stuff does exist, and that card is just better, but, like, this is a really good budget replacement to that card if you're, like, starting off a collection or whatever. Alright. Grim Draugr. 3 mana, 3/2. Snow creature zombie berserker. For 2 mana, it gets, including a snow, it gets +1/+0 and gains menace till end of turn. So basically, this is a 3 mana, 3/2, and you can pay 2 to make it a 4 mana, 4/2 menace. And you can pay it multiple times. So you can be a 5/2, 6/2. Obviously, you're dumping a ton of mana at that point, but I think it's fine, honestly. It's not bad. It's not bad. This is like a solid little curve filler. It's not exciting. It's not even particularly good. But again, if you need a berserker, or you need a zombie, or you're playing snow things, it's okay. Moving on. Hailstorm Valkyrie. 4 mana, 2/2 flying trample. For double snow, it can gain +2/+2 until end of turn. So basically, for 4 mana, you get a 2/2. The trample's a little weird here, because obviously it's only a 2/2, but it does get +2/+2 all in one go. For double snow. Now, the double snow might be harder than you'd think. Single snow, I think, is going to be very realistic. If you want to draft the snow deck, it'll be very easy to get one, and like you're appropriately prioritizing your snowlands in the draft, it'll be fine. Double snow gets a little harder because now you need to draw, like, maybe you've drafted 6 snowlands, and then you need to have drawn a full third of those snowlands to actually get this ability going. But if you can pull this off, like, you're basically attacking with a 4/4 flying trample every turn, like, that's not bad. I think this card is probably a bit better than it looks. It looks a little bad, 4 mana, 2/2, kind of whatever. But I would be, and again, the fact that it's uncommon makes me feel like I'm probably right about this, but I suspect this card is scarier than it looks at first glance. All right. Ow. Damn it. It's like speared the top of my mouth with a cracker. Damn it, that hurt. Okay. So here is our Mythic Foretell spell for black. So for 4 black, I choose a creature type, return up to 2 creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield. So basically, yeah, for 6 mana, you get 2 creatures back directly to the battlefield as long as they both share a type. That's pretty good. It's not like incredible or anything. I don't even know how good this is going to be in limited, frankly, but it's not terrible. Now, you can foretell it. Again, paying the 2 as always, and then paying 7, so actually 1 more than that. And this is one of the few instances where the foretell cost is actually higher than the base cost. Basically, like, to do this, you actually need to pay 9 mana total, right? 2 and then 5, and then 7 on a subsequent turn. Poutine is great. I'm not entirely sure what that has to do with anything, but it's a categorically fair assertion to make. I wish I had poutine right now. I haven't had poutine since the pandemic. There's nowhere around me that makes good poutine. It's a sad time. Anyway, we're getting off track. If you do foretell this, instead of choosing 2 creature cards of a specific type, all creature types of, again, the specific type come back to the battlefield instead. So it's a shades of. This is like a weird kind of hybrid between Rise of the. This is a weird hybrid between like Rise of the Dark Realms, which is like a pretty common black finisher in EDH, right? But Rise of the Dark Realms is like way better because you don't have to choose a creature type, and you also get to take all your opponent's shit as well. And then it's like also like a more expensive version of Patriarch Spitting, which is an old school card. That says each player chooses a creature type, and each player returns all creatures of a type chosen this way from his or her graveyard to play. So you're paying more mana for the new version, but your opponent doesn't get to bring their stuff back. The downside is that it costs more than just 5, because for 5, doing this is like quite powerful. My take on it is frankly that I do not think this card is that good. I think it's way too expensive for limited. Like, again, maybe I play it. Maybe I play this in my sealed deck if I have the tribal synergies for it as a finisher, and that's like okay. I don't think I would ever play this in draft, and I truly just don't think I would ever play this in Commander or even Brawl. Like, you could just do better things. Like, if you're playing Brawl, just play Nezahal, or not Nezahal, Nethroy. Nethroy is like this, but like 1,000 times better. If you're playing EDH, again, you have Rise of the Dark Realms, you have Patriarch Spitting. You don't need to do this. I think this is definitely like, I think this might be like the worst mythic in the set, in my personal opinion. It is fringe playable in a sealed deck if you have enough creatures that it's worth it, but it's also not the kind of card you want to draw early. Because it's not even guaranteed to be ever good. And if you have this in your hand at the beginning, like, holy crap, it's just rotting. Like, it's not fully rotting because, yes, you can pay the 2 mana. And that is nice. But, like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not very high on this card, is all I'm saying. Alright, next card is Infernal Pet. 3 mana 2/2. Kind of whatever. Whenever you cast your second spell, so this is another second spell matters card, put a 1/1 counter on Infernal Pet and it gains flying till end of turn. Okay. Okay. This card definitely wins the art for like most morbidly cute. It's like it's very adorable, but it's like also eating this like delightful little like fairy thing. Like looks very satisfied with itself. It's a pretty decent enabler or a pretty decent payoff at common for the cast 2 spells deck. But it also doesn't have any relevant creature types. It gets an imp, so it doesn't combo well with your berserkers, your angels, your whatever. Again, I don't know if that I don't think this card is that good, but if the play 2 spells deck is real, then this might be a part of that. But I'm not super high on it. Okay. Next one, Jarl of the Forsaken. 4 mana 3/2 flash. Flash is interesting on a black card. When Jarl of the Forsaken enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. Interesting. So, and it does have foretell, a foretell cost of 2. So you can break that up again over a couple turns. Let's see. Basically, so if you make an attack and you're like sort of like you get to these weird scenarios where you sort of like attack, you have a 2/2 and your opponent has a 1/3. And oftentimes you just don't bother attacking, right? Because it's like they're just going to bounce off each other and either dies. It's not a big, nothing really happens. But on the flip side, your opponent's almost always going to make that block because it's a seemingly innocuous block, right? You get to, like, knowing that this card is in the format is going to make, knowing this card is in the format, this is essentially a combat trick, right? Because you can play it as with flash, so it's going to happen at instant speed. Knowing this card is in the format basically means that if you ever see your opponent making a weird attack where, like, they're not going to kill your creature, but you're not going to kill their creature, and they're kind of just attacking for, like, no particular reason, it might actually be safer to just take the damage if you don't want to lose the creature you block with, because they could definitely have this after the damage has been dealt, and then just use that to finish off the creature while getting to keep their creature. So you're down a resource and they're not, because they've also got a 3/2 play now. So beware. This card basically just says be wary of suspect attacks in a black deck, because this is the kind of thing they might be trying to get set up. There's been a lot of effects like this in the past, but this is like just another version of that. The sort of finisher effect. Alright. Karfell Kennelmaster. When Karfell Kennelmaster enters the battlefield, up to 2 target creatures each gain +1/+1 and indestructible until end of turn. It is a 5 mana 4/4. That's actually pretty good for a common. It's not yep. Slipping down into a bad posture again. Thank you for that. That's actually pretty good, honestly, I think. It's sort of interesting because, I mean, it's a 5 mana 4/4, which is like a reasonably respectable body. It's not terribly interesting. But it's not bad either. And then it basically just means that the fact that it's 2 creatures is really cool. Because basically it ETBs, and now you've got a 4/4 that's kind of holding down the fort, and it lets you send in 2 of your other creatures kind of in with impunity, right? Like the +1/+1 is relevant because it means that creatures that before couldn't really get in now are actually threatening to trade with creatures that they have. Or it might mean that you're able to just like force them to not block because you're like, or like, because they can't block, right? Like, or like they can block, but it won't accomplish anything. So they might not want to, like, if you have 2 2/2s and they have 2 3/3s, they were holding you back, right? You couldn't attack with those 2/2s. But now you've got 2 3/2 indestructibles, and if they block with their 3/3s, the 3/3s are just going to die. So now you can basically like force 6 damage through, or force your opponent to trade their 2 3/3s for functionally your 2 2/2s, because they've only been temporarily boosted. Like, it always feels bad when you're essentially like losing a creature to a creature that normally it shouldn't have lost to, kind of thing. I think this card is interesting, and it's going to create like some really interesting like combat openings. I would keep an eye on this card. I think this card is better than it looks, just being like a random common for 5. I could see a lot of aggressive decks really wanting like one of these near the top of their curve to just really force in those points of damage near the mid to late game. I like this common. It's kind of cool. All right, Coma's Faithful. 3 mana for a 3/1 lifelink. When it dies, each player mills 3. I don't think this card is good. It trades with obviously everything. Like, being a 3/1 is just pretty irrelevant. Yes, it gains you 3 life, but like, I don't think that matters. And like, each player mills 3. I just don't see why that matters either. It's almost flavor text. Like, it just doesn't do anything meaningful. I'm pretty sure this card's just bad. 3/1 for 3 is like just not a good rate. I would say pass on this card. I don't like it. Poison the Cup, on the other hand, I've seen this one already. I saw this in the spoilers. Holy crap, this card is ridiculous. So this card is literally just murder with upside, right? So we've all probably seen the card Murder at some point, right? Murder, right? Just straight up 3 instant destroy target creature. Nice and clean. This card is just that with more stuff on it. Still 3 mana, still instant, still destroy target creature, but you can foretell it, and if you happen to foretell it, you also just get the Scry 2 for doing that. So it's literally like the floor on this spell is just straight up murder, and the ceiling is murder where you get to Scry 2. And that's really, really good. Like, this card is legitimately strong. I don't even think you need to go out of your way to try to foretell it. Like, if you get the Scry 2, great. But if on turn 3 you just need to kill your opponent's creature, just kill your opponent's creature. It's fine. It's a really nice card. I think this card is super, super strong. Possibly one of the better black, probably the best black uncommon, and again, possibly one of the better uncommons, period. Priest of the Haunted Edge, 2 mana 0/4, sacrifice Priest of the Haunted Edge. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of snow lands you control. So notably, this only cares about your lands, not your snow permanents. So, like, for example, it itself doesn't add to that -X, which I think is kind of a waste. Oh god, this card is terrible. Yeah. Also, you can only activate this ability on your turn, aka only like whenever you can attack, do a sorcery. So you can't like block with it and then -X. And you have to sacrifice. Oh my, okay, this card is terrible. We're done with this card. Raise the Draugr. 2 mana instant. Choose 1. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return target 2 creature cards. If they share a type from your graveyard to your hand. This card is just really good, I think. Hang on. Back from X. Let me write. Hang on. Extinction. There we go. Return from Extinction. So it's just this card. Okay, yeah. So it's literally just this card, but with different text, because this one is like sliver specific or whatever. And Extinction doesn't really make they basically just renamed it to make more sense flavorfully in the set. I think it's a fine card. I don't think it's incredible or anything, but if you do have that tribal ability to either buy back 2 zombies, 2 berserkers, 2 elves, whatever, you're getting a lot of value out of that. And I do think that that's pretty cool. Like for 2 mana, you're just getting back like potentially 2 really good cards from your graveyard, and you get to recast them. It's instant, so you can do it at the end of your opponent's turn, untap, cast those cards right away. And it doesn't clutter up your mana, your curve or anything. All right, here we have Return Upon the Tide, which, like, incidentally, I'm just gonna like zoom in on aggressively. Oh my god, that's not why. Why would you do that? Okay. Look at this art. This art is so good. There's like purple aura stuff going on here and everything. Like, this is just a beautifully rendered card. Oh, I should have just been doing this from the start. It's much bigger and much better to watch. All right, well, apologies to the viewers of the first 2 videos. We're doing this from now on. So 4 mana sorcery, 5 mana sorcery. All right, I'm already skeptical. Return to a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now that's not a bad. This one, it's not bad, but this is amazing. I love this. Oh, you like the? Oh, sorry, the pre-start. It's not my style. It's a little bit too metal for my liking. Like, I love that people who are into metal are getting a set that's kind of like geared to them, but that's not my thing. But I'm not here to try to tell people how to enjoy art. Art is great. But anyway, so basically, so this is 4 mana. Sorry, 5 mana. I keep saying 4, but I mean it's 4 colors. 5 mana, bring any creature back from your graveyard directly to the battlefield. So that's basically always the going rate. 5 mana is the rate for take something from your graveyard and put it into play. But if it's an elf, then you get the bonus of also making 2 additional elf tokens, which is pretty cool. So you basically get the thing back and 2 free 1/1s. And then you can also foretell it. So again, it's a little bit cheaper on the turn you do it, and then it only costs 4. So I don't think I would play this card other than in my tribal elf deck, and only if I really had creatures that I felt were actually worth spending 4 to 5 mana to bring back, which is not always the case. Elves especially are known for being kind of cheap. So paying 5 mana to bring back like a 3 mana card is kind of eh. But if the payoff is there, this card is good. This card got spoiled pretty early on. This card is sweet. So this is Rise of the Dreadmont. So 3 mana instant. Create X 2/2 Black Zombie Berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. So basically, if you or your opponent casts some sort of Wrath of God-esque effect, right, a board sweeper of any kind, for every single non-token creature that died, that's not just yours, that's not just theirs, that's just all of them. So like, you had 3 creatures, your opponent had 4, you're playing EDH, so your other 2 opponents each had like 2 or 3, and now you cast this after the Wrath happens, and it's instant, so you can like, if your opponent's wrathing, yeah. No, this card is absurd. This card is really good. Like, if you use this basically after a Wrath is resolved, you're going to pretty easily get, like, 4 to 8 zombie tokens. It's only a rare. Again, it's a rare because in limited, this is only a 1v1 scenario and so you're unlikely, like, it's not likely to, like, get you more than, like, 2 to 3 zombies, which, don't get me wrong, 2 to 3 zombies after a Wrath, that just means you're, like, untapping with 6 power worth of creatures and they presumably have none. So that's very good. And then not only that, but you get to foretell this, which means that if you pay 2 sometime early on in the game, just for 1 single black mana at any time at instant speed, after somebody casts a Wrath, you get to pay 1 single black mana and just get a board full of zombies again. And they don't even have to play tapped or anything, so they can like block the next thing. I think this card is absurd. This card is really, really good. It's obviously conditional. A specific set of things needs to happen to make that good, but it's very, very good. I know that I've seen people talking about it, like, among other things, in concert with Navineral, Urborg Tyrant, one of the new commanders from Commander Legends, where basically, like, he also, when he enters the battlefield, you create a 2/2 black zombie for each creature that died this turn. So the idea is you Wrath with him, or you can use the whenever Navineral dies ability, you pay 1, and then you destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. And then after that, you've got that thing on suspend, and you pay another 1, and you get a bunch of creatures back again. And this is just like one random interaction, right? I honestly think that again, it's a niche card, it's a fringe card. It's not going to be good all the time. It's good in response to a very specific set of things happening. But the rate for which you get to do that at is like unparalleled. Like, as low as 1 mana to get, like, again, 6 zombies pretty easily in a game of EDH. Probably more than that. This card is really cool. It's actually, like, it's going to be very decent. It's actually funny. I've been talking about EDH pretty much first and foremost because that's where I think this card is going to shine. I'm not actually sure how good this card is in Limited, but I could definitely see, again, you suspend this early on. You really want to suspend this because getting to pay 1 mana later in the game, because you're not going to want this early, right? So you suspend this really early and then you pay 1 mana in the game. And then you get to, like, you make a big attack, or your opponent makes a big attack, and you trade off a bunch of creatures, and then they're like, okay, well, boards are kind of empty, and now we can rebuild, and then bam, surprise. Like, you traded 4 to 6 creatures, like, between the two of you, 4 to 6 creatures died, bam, you get 6 zombies, untap, attack them with 6 zombies, like, what the hell? Like, that's ridiculous. So I think this card is very strong. I legitimately think this card is really good. And I hope I'm not wrong about that. Alright, Rune of Mortality is a black rune. I've already talked about the runes. This one gives Death Touch. It's whatever. Somebody did mention that this one in particular is a cute combo with Embercleave. You can make Embercleave also grant the creature Death Touch. So Embercleave now grants +1/+1 Death Touch and double strike and Death Touch. And Trample, sorry. And because of the way that Trample interacts with Death Touch, you only need to deal 1 lethal damage to a creature with Death Touch to kill it, or to kill it if you have Death Touch, and then everything else tramples over. And then you get a second strike, which tramples over again, so, like... But I also don't think anybody's going to be playing Rune of Mortality in Standard. But it could be a really janky thing to do in an EDH deck where you're trying to find that. What's the question, Redact? I'm going to keep talking about the Skemfar Avenger, but I'll answer it after I do that. So Skemfar Avenger, 2 mana 3/1. Elf Berserker. Whenever another non-token elf or berserker you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. This card is really good. I don't know about Berserker Tribal. I don't really know if that's a real thing. But Elf Tribal sure is a real thing. And this card is incredibly good in Elf Tribal. Obviously, like, elves do make a lot of like tokens. And it doesn't pay you for tokens. But being able to just draw a card every time like an elf you control dies is a ridiculously strong ability because it basically just means that like you're just replacing it with another card. So you're not actually down on cards by doing that. And the you lose a life part is like, again, if we're talking for EDH especially, it's not relevant. Like it's a very, very minor clause. We're not worried about it. In terms of limited, I think it's honestly fine. A 2-mana 3/1 with the ability to replace itself when it dies, because this does trigger off itself as well. Oh, no. Never mind, I lied. This does say another. So that is a knock against it, because if they kill this, it won't replace itself. I wonder about that. So it's a little worse than I thought, but I still think it's pretty good. If you are playing Elf Tribal or Berserker Tribal in Limited, this card is probably worth an inclusion. You put it on the stack, and they're like, okay, cool, you're making 2 zombies, whatever, and then I sack Nev while it's on the stack. Would you? I'm actually not sure. So when it dies, you may pay 1 when you do destroy all artifact creatures and enchantments. You would only get... So you only get the zombies when Nev ETBs, not when he dies. When he ETBs, you make zombies equal to the things that died. When he dies, you blow up everything. So the idea is you basically have him out, pay 1 when he dies, like sack him, pay 1, and then cast them again to get zombies. So like that'd be kind of weird. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding the question. What do we have? Stop it from being canceled. I don't think anything would cancel it. Like, if the creatures have died, you're gonna get zombies. That's just, it's that simple. Like, they can't prevent the creatures from being dead. Or from having died, if they already have. So I think the answer is yes, you would get all the zombies. Obviously, don't quote me on that. I'm not a judge, but that would be my initial assumption, certainly. Alright, Skemfar's Shadow Sage. 4 mana, 2/5. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a creature type in common. Presumably elves. In this case, it is an elf cleric. So basically, ETB, drain equal to number of elves, but also, again, just whatever the greatest type happens to be. It could be something else in some scenario. Or you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures. This is fine. Obviously, the lose X life mode is probably going to be more relevant, but if you're up against it, and you have like a few elves lying around, then gaining a few life and putting a 2/5 into play could be good. Like, that will stabilize you decently. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Until like okay, now I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so Rise of the Dreadmarn only checks on resolution. So if it's still on the stack, and then in response to this card going on the stack, you then blow up the worlds, then by the time it resolves, it's just going to check how many things have now died. But that being said, if like your opponent still has a chance to cancel Rise of the to counterspell or whatever Rise of the Dreadmarn in the space after you've sacked the Navineral and killed everything, but before this spell is actually resolved, because it's still in the stack, and as long as it's still in the stack, it's still counterable. But if that all goes off without a hitch, and you cast this, and then sack your Nev in response, and then they don't counter the Rise of the Dreadmarn after you do that, then you will get all the zombies, yes. Yeah. But if they counterspell it, then you'll get 0 zombies. Because it's still in the stack, and as long as it's in the stack, it's fair game for a counterspell. Alright, we've got Skull Raid next. It's a sorcery. Target opponent discards 2 cards for 4 mana. Not great. Obviously, like, Mind Rot is the same card for 2. If fewer than 2 cards were discarded this way, you draw cards equal to the difference. This is kind of a funny card. This sort of basically says, so if your opponent has 2 cards, they discard 2 cards. That's that. If your opponent has 1 card, then they discard a card and you draw a card. It is nice, actually, now that I think about it, because it's a Mind Rot that doesn't stop being good in the late game. Actually, that's really cool. Because Mind Rots are obviously, if you draw a Mind Rot and your opponent has 0 cards in hand, you just drew a blank piece of cardboard. That card does nothing. But if they don't have any cards in hand and then you cast Skull Raid, you're actually just casting 4 mana draw 2. Now, 4 mana draw 2 at sorcery speed is not a good card in any particular respect. Like, it's fine. But the fact that it's basically a no, like it has a fail case in case your opponent doesn't have cards to discard is actually really cool. So initially I was down on this card because I was like, that's weird. Like, it's just kind of bad mind rot. But the fact that it's a mind rot that's never dead, it's a mind rot that can actually draw you cards if your opponent actually doesn't have any left, is really cool. And of course, it has foretell for 2, which makes it a little bit more interesting there as well. So the next card is Tegrid's Shadow. And this card kind of confuses me because the card Barter in Blood already exists, and it's like just mostly strictly better than this. What? Barter in Blood. There we go. So Barter of Blood is 4 mana. Oh, never mind. I'm an idiot. I did not realize the Barter in Blood was an instant. Or not an instant. It's a sorcery. So never mind. This card is probably way better than that then. So this is Tegrid's Shadow, which is the same as Barter in Blood, but for 1 more mana, it's an instant speed effect. Nev seems like a cool build, honestly. I'm down. That sounds cool. Feel free to feel free to join the Discord if you are so inclined. Chat with like-minded community members. And B, if and when you come up with a list for that, feel free to drop that in the deck list submission section of the Discord. Always interested to see what my community is up to when it comes to EDH, since that is my favorite format, as I said. So basically, this is a 5 mana instant speed Barter in Blood, which is probably pretty dang good. Obviously, it is symmetrical. You do also have to sack 2 creatures, but if you have no creatures in play and you're like, your opponent's got 2 creatures and you're like, oh god, like I need to get rid of these, this is basically just 5 mana kill 2 creatures. Which is not bad. And again, you can foretell it, so it actually can cost literally the same cost as Barter in Blood, albeit you do have to pay the additional upfront payment of 2 mana. But no, this card is way better than I thought. I thought it was honestly just bad Barter in Blood, but for some reason I thought the Barter in Blood was instant, which apparently I'm just off my rocker. But yeah, this is actually instant speed Barter in Blood, which is great. All right, Varagoth Bloodsky Sire. 3 mana 2/3, Death Touch, and it has Boast. Target player searches their library for a card, shuffles their library, and then puts that card on top of it. So a lot of people have been talking about this card, from what I've seen, because it basically lets you like Vampiric Tutor, except you don't have to pay mana. I don't know that I actually think this card is good. I'm not gonna lie. It's a 2 mana 3/2, 2 mana 2/3. 3/2 sounds so much better. 2 mana 2. It's not even any of those things. I just lied. It is a 3 mana 2/3, not a 2 mana 3/2. 3 mana 2/3 Death Touch. So like, it's not gonna be the greatest thing in the world to block, obviously. Oh, thanks, hon. So it's not gonna be the greatest thing in the world to block, but like, I don't know, paying 3. I'm not a big. This is also a personal bias thing, but I'm not a big fan of tutors that put cards on top of your library because you're not actually drawing a card when you do that. You're actually just changing the card that you draw. And like, yes, you're changing it to the best card you can possibly draw, which is not a bad thing. But especially when it comes to Commander, I really feel like card advantage is important, and card selection is not that important. So I'm not saying this is unplayable. It's certainly far from that, but I don't think it's great. And I'm personally not super keen on it, but I also do think it's nice. It is probably decent in Brawl. I will say that this card is probably pretty decent in Brawl. I will certainly concede that point. All right, next one we got is Vengeful Reaper. This card is really cool, actually. So this is a 4 mana 2/3 flying Death Touch Haste. That is a lot of keywords. All of them quite good too. Excuse me. I think this card is great. It's just a really good, solid black uncommon. You can also foretell it again, so again, breaking up that payment. I'm going to stop making that comment because we all know what foretell does by now. But yeah, so foretell for 2. But a 2/3 flying Death Touch Haste that you can pay, like for 4 mana it's good, and if you're paying 2 mana for it on that turn, that's great. Village Rites is a reprint, so we're not going to need to talk about that card. It does have some metal AF art, though. Way Down. So Way Down is... I think Way Down is really good, honestly. So for 1 mana, target creature gets -3/-3 till end turn. It is a sorcery, which means you can't do it as a combat trick or in response to that, or on the end of your turn, or on the end of their turn or anything. It's fine, but it's not amazing. But it's still pretty good. But it does have the slight caveat if you do have to have a creature card already in your yard in order to cast this, as you will need to exile that creature card. So it's not unconditional, but it is very cheap removal, and I think that that's like a good line to tread. I don't think this card is incredible or anything like that, but it is solid, I think. I would probably play one in my deck, unless I had ways of aggressively filling my graveyard, in which case I might play more. Then there's Wither Crown, which is a 2-mana enchantment that says enchanted creature has base power 0, so it doesn't matter how big its power is, it just can't deal any damage anymore. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life unless you sack a creature. So what this is frequently going to say is 2 mana, like sorcery speed, 2 mana destroy target creature. Unless the creature has like abilities that are fine, because it doesn't lose its abilities or anything. So if the creature has beneficial enough abilities, your opponent may choose to just eat the 1 life for a few turns while they work towards it. But if it's just like a random 5/5, then they're probably just gonna be like, screw it, kill it. Unless they have a way to get rid of the Wither Crown. So I think this card is fine. It's like a weird removal spell, but it's not terrible. Alright, and that brings us to the end of black.